Well, hello.
Hello to you too, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Don't you look lovely without a headset on?
I know. I'm liking this new look for us.
I'm liking it a lot. I think that we're just slowly improving time after time. Like when we look back at the quality of our first couple of episodes, I'm like, we need to call Loic and Steve and just kind of start over and do another one with Katie and just get them all nice and neat and tidy looking and streamlined and have no technical issues. And that will just be great. And we'll be able to hear
Um,
us. It'll be great.
I know, but look at how far we have come, my dear. Isn't that
I
amazing?
I know. Yep.
Yeah.
We're over 20 episodes in. That's pretty exciting to be able to say that and moving forward and getting more and more people on board all the time.
And not bad considering our first episode dropped on June 4th. And like when we're recording today, that's less than 4 months ago.
Yeah, I know. It is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with how we've done.
It's not bad. And such great feedback. So many incredible guests that we've had so far.
I know.
Been so
Just
wonderful. And I've learned
fabulous
so
people.
much from everybody.
I know some of the tips that we've been getting. I'm just like, okay, I have to make sure that I just put that aside. I should have a little recipe book of all the baking scraps, tips and tricks that we've gotten from people because they don't only give them to us at the end of the show, they
Mhm.
also drop them throughout the episodes. And we're getting these little tidbits, and we can be like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And
So,
so many incredible new bakes to try too.
so many. Yeah.
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 But
Very
maybe we
excited.
can compile them. Maybe at the end, like once we launch our 20th episode, maybe we could actually go through and pull out all the tidbits of all the baking tips
Yes.
that we've gotten from all of our guests and put that into like
A
a little
post?
reel. Hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Yep, definitely can do that. Yeah. Have you been baking anything recently?
So I was just recently up in the Okanagan visiting my dad and his
Yes.
partner and had a really, really lovely visit. And so we actually had a chance to bake some bread together.
Oh,
And it's so wonderful. It just brings back so many memories of being little, even though I'm not anymore. But
a little.
it's it's so cool though when you go, it takes you right back, right? Because you know, in my kitchen, I use my KitchenAid bowl, or I've got this big, larger plastic bowl. But back home, we used to have this enamel sort of big basin. Like it was literally like this big. And that's how they bake bread, like 12 loaves at a time kind of thing. This is how we always
We had
bake bread
to. Well,
with
maybe
my
not that.
grandparents, with
Yeah.
my grandmother, or even my mom, when we baked like our sweetbread, it was always in
Yeah.
these large batches. So to go back to that, and they're still she's still using it. My dad's partner, who's also Portuguese, still uses the same one that they've used for like generations
I
almost,
love
right?
that.
So
Yeah.
it was really cool. So it really brought me back to the
Oh,
early days of my baking journey. So
that's
yeah, very
so
sweet.
nice. Did you
And
make some Portuguese sweetbread then? Did you
we
bring
actually
some
made
home?
we didn't make sweetbread this time around. We just made regular sort of like bread, like
Okay.
like white bread, regular
Bread,
white bread,
bread.
just regular white bread. It's all good.
That's good.
I'm not picky.
I like white bread. It's yummy
Yeah.
stuff, especially with
Yeah.
some butter slathered onto it. Mm,
There's nothing like a freshly baked loaf of
hot.
homemade bread.
Oh,
Mm,
fragrant.
mm,
Oh,
mm, mm,
delicious.
mm, 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 mm. So how about you? What have you been baking?
Bread, actually, which is kind of funny.
We're in our bread
Um,
making era.
I watched the
Excuse me.
season premiere of the Great Australian Bake Off.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched a couple of episodes now, so I can't remember for sure which. I think it's the second week, yes, because second week was bread week.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
And
early for bread week.
it's early for bread week. So yeah, tough, but at least they got it out of the way. And for the technical bake, Rachel Koo had them make a zolf, which
Oh,
I have never heard of before. but it is a braided loaf that looks kind of like a challah. And it is served, it's got like a orange blossom water in it, which I don't like because to me it smells like suntan lotion or sunblock, but I was true to the recipe, and I braided the 6-strand braid and put toasted vanilla whipped cream on top,
That sounds
which
incredible.
it was really, really, really good.
So remind us again, how did you make the toasted vanilla part of that?
I made sure that I had some actual vanilla beans and then I chopped them up into like 4 or 5 pieces.
Mhm.
And then I just heated up a frying pan basically and just threw them in there until they get really dry and they start to kind of hiss and crackle and blister a little bit. And then you let them cool and then you grind them up and then you've got this nice vanilla powder essentially.
Amazing. So I wonder, was it the same? Like, because sometimes you can actually buy already pre-done vanilla powder. Do you think that would be the same thing? If,
I have
or,
vanilla powder, but it is white and it's mixed with cornstarch or
okay.
icing sugar, one or the other. Can't remember right now. And so I would not say that's the same thing. And
No.
I don't know if you can get it in any other form. I've got vanilla bean paste,
Hmm.
which could potentially be the same thing, but this was very dry. So
Okay.
not blended. And it folded into the whipped cream really nicely, and it was delicious.
And that whipped cream must have tasted amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
good. You should put it on some bread.
I
Maybe
think
not bread that tastes like suntan lotion, but
and
I
did it taste like, was there too much orange
just
blossom for your liking
it's
or
I always thought orange blossom would taste like oranges, but it does not. It
no?
because they're blossoms, they're not oranges. So no,
It's more
I don't enjoy it.
floralish, isn't
I'm
it?
not big on the florals.
Yeah.
So rose water, orange blossom water, no, not a huge fan. No,
Yeah.
no,
But you
just
like
making it better.
elderflower.
I like elderflower. Yes, I have
Mhm.
discovered that. So who do we have on deck for today?
So today we've got an incredibly interesting, not that any of our other bakers have not been interesting or any of our other guests have not been interesting, but we have a lady by the name of Micheline Maynard. And you may or may not have heard of her, but if you actually do a lot of reading of Food and Wine magazine or even some business magazines, you might have come across her name. Incredibly interesting person. Her tastes and her experience has been so vast, and I can't wait to actually get into a conversation with her and learn more about her and her baking journey as well.
Fabulous. Well, this is a bit of a departure for us because this is not someone who's been on a baking show, but I know she
No,
does write about baking shows.
she
I
does write about baking shows and restaurants and different things that happen in the culinary world. So one of her latest articles was actually about how AI is actually taking over reservation systems at various restaurants.
Oh,
So
really?
where you would normally, call in to actually talk to somebody, instead you actually get an AI generated reservation system.
I don't
So
love it. I don't love it at all.
yeah, missing out some of that personal contact, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
connection and being able to, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's great for some things. I think there's definitely a place and time for
Yes.
AI. But I agree with you. I think there's still something to be said about that human
Human
connection.
touch. Yeah. Yeah. On that
Mhm.
note, I realized that I have been saying a word incorrectly this whole entire time.
Oh, what's that?
Well, I always say culinary, and I think I
Oh,
should just say culinary, but
culinary. Hmm.
culinary. So if anybody's been like, ew, I hate the way she says that, I apologize. And I will now say culinary from
You
now
know,
on.
honestly, I've never noticed you saying it that way because I mean, there are words in the English language, especially that people just have different pronunciations or yeah, just the way they pronounce it. It just the emphasis on the different syllables is maybe slightly
Yes.
different
Yep.
or what have you. So
Different
yeah,
emphasis on the different syllable, as my dad used to say.
exactly.
Shall we
Exactly.
ask Micheline how to pronounce culinary?
She
She
would
would know.
probably be an expert to actually tell us exactly how that should be
Yes.
pronounced.
Sorry. Chewy thinks it's a good idea. Hey.
Yep. Hey, Micheline, how are you?
Hi. Hi. How are
Well,
you?
good. Welcome to the Baking Scraps.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, we're
We
so excited to have you. I'm
Thank
excited to
you.
learn more
Oops.
about what you do and your
Yeah.
history and all of that. My name's Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
and I'm
Christina.
Christina.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, you've got a bookshelf behind you.
Can you see all my cookbooks?
Oh,
Oh,
are those
yeah.
all
It's
cookbooks
solid
behind you?
cookbooks. So there's actual other books over there, but yeah, I
They don't
put all the
matter.
cookbooks behind. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then my book is right there. So,
Oh, well,
but
we
I
want to see
sent you the
that.
book cover. So,
Yes, you did. Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome. Yeah, your
Thank
latest
you.
one called Satisfaction Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. I did
Yes.
not choose the title. I thought it was a little racy, but
Woo.
there actually is a part of Zingerman's that is satisfaction guaranteed. They have a very liberal return policy, so that's why my editor chose it.
Ah, makes
It
sense.
makes sense.
Sometimes
Yeah.
those editors, right? They just change things and sometimes you just got to trust the person.
Well, yeah, I remember the day they told me the name of the title and there was sort of a silence and I thought it sounds like porn.
Hey, you know what
But
they
you don't, you pick your battles when you deal with publishers, and so I thought I'm not going to fight this. It's not
Yeah.
worth it. They're
And you know
public,
what
yeah,
I was going to say, you know what they say though, sex sells.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, the interesting thing is it sold really well as an audiobook, and it sold really well as an ebook, as a Kindle.
mhm.
It hasn't sold as many hardcovers as I think they would like, but it came out in 2022, so like really I was doing all Zoom promotions
Everything
and that was
online. Yeah.
Yeah.
awful. And then a year later I was doing in-person promotions, but by then, you get about 6 months with a new book. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That
so
initial straight out the gate type of reaction.
oh, pre-orders. Oh my gosh. Pre-orders are now everything.
Yeah.
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 They want you to hit the bestseller lists right away. There's no
Wow.
time now for books to kind of build a following. They want you to be just thumping those pre-orders like a year ahead of time. I feel
Wow.
terrible. I'm not a good, like, please buy a book you can't own for another 6 months.
I
But
that
it's fine. It came out, it was published. I've gotten really great feedback on it, so I'm not gonna,
no,
I'm
that
not gonna
must
worry about
feel
it.
really good. That
Mhm.
Hmm,
it's
hmm.
always so nice to get that positive feedback.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was not your first book.
No.
You've written five
So
others.
my expertise was in the automobile industry, so I'm kind of a pivot person.
Ooh.
And I was always the person in the press corps that chose the place to eat. So I was arranging to go to the Paris Motor Show, and I got this email from Patricia Wells, and she taught private cooking lessons at the time. And it said, remember, you signed up 2 years ago on our waiting list. Well, we have an opening and you have 2 weeks to decide, and it's $4,000. And I thought, and I had just bought a new condo and I had $4,000 set aside for appliances. And so, of course, the first person I asked was my mom, who said, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And then I asked all my friends, and they said, if you don't do this, you will regret it forever. So I listened to my friends, and that kind of kicked things off for
That
Sounds
me
like
as,
they knew what they were talking about.
yeah.
yeah, well, you have to send it out to the universe and hope that the universe listens.
Take
So,
that leap of
Absolutely.
faith.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sounds like it worked out.
Hmm,
Put you on a
hmm.
whole new trajectory.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I still do some automotive, but cooking is so much more fun.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that a little. First
Hmm.
of all, actually, before we get into that, one of the
Yeah.
things we usually start off all of our podcasts with is we ask our guests what they've been baking lately. So,
Yeah.
Micheline,
Great.
we ask you, what have you been baking
Sure.
lately?
So I've baked the viral plum tart that's been going around on TikTok and Instagram and others. And I adjusted the recipe a tiny bit because I just have been experimenting with oat flour.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
swapped in some oat flour for the white flour. It didn't puff up as much as the picture on the New York Times app,
Yeah.
but it's very, very edible.
So
So
you
I
did
was
just a straight one to one.
so I did a straight one to one. I should have done half and half.
Mm.
I mean, in retrospect, we all experiment and we all learn things.
Yeah.
So I baked the plum tart. I've baked some what they call, everything but the kitchen sink cookies with pretzels
Mhm.
and chocolate chips and things like that in them, and those came out splendidly. I have lots of apples. It's apple season here in Michigan where I live, so I'll be making applesauce and probably apple crisp, and maybe little mini apple hand pies.
Nice.
Oh,
All the
that sounds
apple
Yeah,
desserts.
yeah.
So
oh, it
good this time of
sounds
year.
so good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
fall in Michigan. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
only been there once.
oh, come and visit. We'll be happy.
Yes.
You have a choice of a bridge or a tunnel. But
Well,
we have pretty much the same. I mean, where I'm in southeastern Michigan, we're kind of on a line with London, Ontario, and Toronto. So
okay.
it's that kind of a climate. We don't get nearly the snow because we're not that close to the lake,
Mm,
but
Right.
it's kind of the temperatures are about the same.
there you go.
Yeah.
So have the leaves started turning where you are?
Yes.
Yeah. So
And
it's full
falling
on
on my
fall.
car.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of rain this summer. We missed out on lots of people had lots of rain. We did not. And so we went about 6 weeks with no real measurable rain, which is tough because I like to garden and I hate dumping water on a garden from a garden hose.
Mhm.
So the leaves are turning and then dropping.
Mm,
So we're maybe a third into our color, and then we'll get more. It's now October to,
Yeah,
as we're
tomorrow.
taping. So
yeah.
yeah, tomorrow. So we'll start to get real color very soon.
Beautiful. It's always so gorgeous in the east
Yeah.
with all the color changes in the
How
fall.
about you? Do you get color changes or?
We do. We have a lot of evergreen trees out
Yeah.
west as well,
Hmm.
but certainly the deciduous ones, I think they're called deciduous trees, the
Yeah.
ones that,
Yeah.
yes, that will, yeah. So it's beautiful. They're just
Oh,
starting to
good.
turn out here as well. So bright
Yeah.
reds and yellows and oranges. Yeah, it's
Great.
pretty.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love fall. It's my favorite season until it starts to get super dark, and then it's not my favorite season. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
we still have we are in Michigan. We're the farthest west in the Eastern time zone. So we get an additional hour or so of light from, say, New York or Boston. So our sun is still setting around 7:30 at night.
Oh,
So we can still run out, do a few things,
Errands, yeah.
and before you have to rush home in the dark.
Yeah.
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 It's not always nice to have such short days, but
No.
nice to be cozied up inside
That's true.
when it's cooler
Soup,
weather. So
soup and baking.
yes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Baking up all those apple desserts, getting ready for
sure.
the holiday season.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really it's a wonderful time in the kitchen.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah,
definitely.
wonderful. So how did you actually start your culinary journey?
Well, so I was talking about having taken Patricia Wells's
Mhm.
cooking class in Paris. So I went to Paris. I covered the Paris Motor Show. I went off to Germany for a couple of visits to factories, and then I came back to Paris. And Patricia Wells, for people who are quite familiar with her, is the author of The Food Lover's Guide to Paris. And she's written many, many other cookbooks. And she was a writer for the International Herald Tribune, and her work appeared in the New York Times, in many articles, still active. And she's kind of before Ina Garten, she was kind of Ina, but she was never on television or radio. So you would have to know her through her books or her app, essentially. But
Right.
Patricia would have 7 students at a time. She had an atelier in Paris just for her cooking class. So you walked in and there was a big long table where everybody ate, and then there were stations in the kitchen in her big, big kitchen, and they usually paired you up with someone. So I was paired up with gentlemen from Cleveland. There were 5 ladies and 2 gentlemen, and it was a father and son, and the mom was supposed to come, and she canceled at the last minute, and then his dad came, and you've never seen a sort of gruffer, more skeptical person ever. And so I got paired with Joe. And so our first menu I remember was lamb. We did a lamb menu, and then we did some sort of dessert where we made egg whites and folded something into it, and he was plopping the ingredient into it. And I said, "No, you have to fold it." And he just looked at me and said, "I have no idea what that means." And so Patricia is like walking around the room monitoring everybody. And she leaned into me and she said, "You can cook. And it was, it was like winning a gold medal in the Olympics. And so, and maybe she does that for everybody to raise their feelings of confidence.
Oh, don't
But kind
take
of from
that.
that moment, I felt like if Patricia Wells says I can cook, I guess I can cook. And so I did have the opportunity to chat with her while I was there. We got a little one-on-one time. And I said, I've been a business journalist all this time, and I'd really like to write for the New York Times dining section. But they told me that because I didn't have a restaurant background and I hadn't been to culinary school, that I didn't qualify. And this is a different era, I have to say.
Okay.
And she said, well, what if you wrote a story for the business? I was part of the business section. And she said, what if you write something food related for the business section? I said, well, that's a good idea. Do you have any suggestions? And she said, well, you might talk to my friend Ina Garten. So
Oh,
now, interestingly enough, I knew Jeffrey because Jeffrey had been assistant secretary of commerce in Washington, was a professor at Yale, and I would call him for his insights in international trade matters. And I thought, okay, I'll email Jeffrey and I'll just say, Patricia suggested I get in touch. Would Ina be interested in being profiled in the New York Times Sunday business section? So Ina was on TV and her cookbooks had come out, and she just introduced a line of baking mixes with Stonewall Kitchen, which is a pretty well-known name in the States. And Jeffrey's like, must have said, Mickey's a nice person. Why don't you talk to her? And she invited me to come out to East Hampton to her home.
oh
And
my
I,
goodness.
yeah, I know. Like now I'm like, did this really happen?
Yeah.
But she wasn't quite Ina in capital letters yet. She was known and she had a following, but she wasn't the godmother that she is today. So I went out there and I had a lovely interview lunch. She had made us lunch and they were building the barn where her show is now filmed while I was there. And then we sat on her sofa and just chatted for a while. And that story came out, and it was the front section of the New York Times business section. And of course, got a zillion, back then they really cared about page views and most emailed and all that. And it did really, really well. And so then Dining acknowledged that I guess you can write for us.
Oh, that's
So, yeah, so I
great.
did a couple stories for them that got some traction. So I did a story on whoopie pies. Are you familiar with whoopie pies?
Yes.
So they're two cake-like cookies filled with filling. And at the time I suggested the story, I sold in Maine and on the East Coast, but they were starting to spread and they'd shown up in Trader Joe's. And so I did a story on whoopie pies and whether they were cake or cookie, they're having their moment. And The View on ABC TV decided to make the story the subject of their hot topics. So there's my story projected behind Barbara Walters. And it was one of those moments I'm like, again, pinching myself. So that was one. And I'll tell you another story which has Canada in it. So
Okay.
the Pete Wells, who's now retired as a restaurant critic, was the editor. And we were kind of kicking around story ideas. And I said, well, I'm reading about this restaurant in Montreal that serves seal. And I said, I'm going to Montreal on holiday. Should I drop in and try it? And he said, sure, go ahead. So I set up an interview to visit the chef. And then I realized I would have to eat seal in order to write about it. And I really just I really just decided, I guess I have to do this. I guess this is one of those things that you have to do for the story, but I really was not excited to eat seal. But
Oh,
that story, of course, as you might expect, that story got a lot of comments from readers.
I
So
bet.
yeah,
yeah,
so
no kidding.
I haven't suggested eating anything that controversial since then.
Yeah, what does seal taste like?
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to say it tastes like chicken. So the chef prepared it three different ways. He prepared it like smoked meat, he prepared it like sausage, and then he prepared it like a fillet with, I believe, a cranberry sauce. It had some kind of a sweet fruit sauce on it. And I actually have taken classes at Le Cordon Bleu in Ottawa as well. And when I was at Le Cordon Bleu, we had elk. And it reminded me, you serve elk very rare. It's very
Okay.
tender. And so that was what seal reminded me of.
Oh, I
Yeah.
would think it would
Fascinating.
be more gamey.
No, it's not. Well, it's sort of, I
I
hate to
mean,
call
elk
it
definitely I thought of.
seafood. Elk is just, I mean, if you like venison, I don't know if you ever eaten it.
Mhm.
It's a little softer of a meat than venison. So
Mhm.
venison can be very tough. Elk tends not to be. I guess the big challenge is, finding an elk that will volunteer to be your dinner. But, and the point that the chef made, and this was, I believe there was a governor general of Canada who'd gone way up north and she'd visited a village, a First Nations village, and they offered her seal. Does this sound familiar at all? So this apparently they offered her seal as a sign of respect, and
Mhm.
they did eat it because it was local, and they had the seal kill every year. I hope I'm not freaking people out by talking about this, but
No, it's
they
fascinating.
had the kill every year, and then they didn't want to waste anything. So there was one abattoir in all of Eastern Canada that could prepare it. And then the chef was from that area, and he said, "Well, send me some, and I'll put it on the menu." So, yeah, that's enough seal talk, I
That's
think.
crazy. And
Let's
All
talk
right.
about baking things.
Yes. Well, I
no,
mean,
but it's all interconnected. But
fascinating.
Yeah.
before we move on to that, one of the questions I do have, and going
Yeah.
back to being invited to Ina Gartner's
Hmm.
uh,
Garden.
place for lunch, and
Yeah.
she prepared lunch for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
What did you have? What did she prepare
So,
for you?
she had asked me if I had any dietary issues, and I don't like raw onion, and I don't eat mussels. For some reason, I'm allergic to them,
Mm.
and so she made clam chowder, corn chowder, which is very good, and a big green salad, and then one of her cake mixes was brownies. So the brownies that Ina makes are super famous, and they're in her new book. So I have read her memoir, which actually will be published tomorrow.
Oh,
But
Good.
she writes about brownies in her shop called the Barefoot Contessa, and that
mhm.
people love the brownies, and the price of ingredients went up, and so she's trying to figure out, can I raise the price to $2.75? And she thought, this is so high, I can't imagine that people will buy them, but you know what? I'm going to bake a tray and I'm going to put them out there at 275. And she sold every single one, and she would sell 1,200 brownies a weekend. And her conclusion was that if the thing is good enough, ingredients are good enough, people will pay for it. So
Mhm.
she was selling a brownie baking mix, and she made us brownies, and they were enormous, and I ate the whole thing. Um,
Good for you.
and then I think we just had iced tea or something like that. But so
Right.
this was in, people remember her early show. She used to film in her actual home kitchen.
Mhm.
And people were like lying on the floor, like that famous shot of Julia Child that people have seen. And it got just too cramped. And so she designed the barn where she now films. And there's a show that she has called Be My Guest. It has a brand new season, and you can see the barn in that show. So she's perfectly charming, very warm. I mean, at that point, she hadn't been, just wasn't as famous as she is now. And I think there's a million demands on her time now. So but she was more than willing to have me come and visit, which I
It
really appreciated.
was the right place at the right time for you.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that
And so then I wrote more stories for dining. And then I left the Times in 2010, and I joined National Public Radio here in the States. And I I did a few sort of on-air food related things for them. And I got to be friends with a woman named Evelyn Hannon. And Evelyn was Journeywoman, and she lived in Toronto, and she's one of the first bloggers, and she started her blog Journeywoman in 1994. And she was one of the first first writers that talked about women traveling on their own.
Ooh.
So a friend of mine who liked to travel had tipped me off to her blog. And then I'm one of those people that will reach out by email and compliment, and like I did with you guys, and just basically say, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. And I come to Toronto all the time and love to meet you sometime. And the interesting thing is she's friends with a woman who's on the radio who played Miss Stacy in Anne of Green Gables. So if you remember, yeah, you know the 1985
Yes.
Anne of Green Gables. So that's her best friend, Marilyn Lightfoot, I believe is her name. And so I
I
met,
love Miss
yeah,
Stacy.
Miss Stacy, and she's as sweet as she is on TV. So Evelyn has two daughters, and one of them was a VJ on Much Music.
What?
And she had adopted Chinese grandchildren, and so we went to the dim sum place where Evelyn liked to take her grandchildren. And sadly, we lost her a few years ago. But the reason I bring her up was that I had confided in her. You know, I have these fairy godmothers, and Patricia Wells is one, and Dory Greenspan is another. Dory and I are great friends. And then Evelyn was another one, and I confided in her my desire to become a food writer. And she just said, "You could call yourself culinary woman." And I said, "Do I have your permission?" And she said, "Yes." So Culinary Woman as a blog was born in 2014, and I picked up food writing for Forbes magazine. I went off to Arizona State in Phoenix and taught there for a couple of years in the journalism school. Came back to Michigan when my mom was declining. And then I just kind of made a decision around 2017 that I want to be a food writer full time. And so I had the Culinary Woman name locked up. And it was a blog first, and then when newsletter platforms came around, I put it up on a newsletter platform, and right now it's on Substack. So it's
Wow.
just called the Culinary Woman Newsletter. It's free to sign up, and it's on Substack and comes out every Sunday.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
I looked up Journey Woman. Now I'm
Yeah.
looking up Culinary Woman.
So from Culinary Woman, I was invited to write for a website called The Takeout. And then my path then led to Food and Wine. And one of the editors who'd been at Forbes reached out to me and said, "I'm looking for someone who can write about business. Would you be interested in being a contributor to Food and Wine?" So I said, yes. So now I'm a contributor to Food and Wine, which is exciting. So my main food things right now are the Culinary Woman newsletter and writing for Food and Wine
Yeah.
and following people on Instagram like you guys. So, yeah.
Well,
Well,
we're okay with that. That works
yes,
out
we're
really well
totally
for
good
us.
with that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is incredible how, that chance opportunity that you had to do that culinary school in Paris with
Yeah.
Patricia
Yeah.
Wells
Yeah.
and all of the things that just came from that and all the
Right.
connections that you made. It's just
Yeah.
fascinating that you were able to put it out there and
Hmm.
and make it all work. But not only that, but really took full advantage of all the opportunities that came your way is just incredible.
Well, I think so I love writing and I like talking. I haven't done much with video, but I'm happy to be with you. And I've always looked for the way to connect, like, like a spool of thread that you wind up and eventually, you get to the prize at the end. And I think that a lot of times, like I hear from students and I hear from young journalists, and I mentor students on a regular basis. And I think you have to put it out there. I think you have to just let the universe know what you want to do and then find the ways to make it happen.
Mhm.
So into instance, when the Times said to me, "You can't be a food writer because you don't have any culinary training," I went and got some culinary training. I mean, I don't have like I have a mini certificate from Le Cordon Bleu. I don't have Le Grand certificate that, Julia Child got, but I will tell you a really quick Le Cordon Bleu story. So the way they teach there it's not easy. So they give you a demo. And so, for example, we were doing skate, the fish, in sauce grabiche. And so sauce grabiche is kind of a multi-layered sauce. And I can't give you all the ingredients right now, but it's complicated. Very, very easy to break it. It just will curdle very easily. So they gave us a demo, and then they partner you up with someone, and you're at a culinary level stove, the kind where if you put your fingers down on the stovetop, it's going to, burn your fingers. And I was making this sauce grabiche and it broke. And I didn't know what to do. And our chef instructor came around and he said, throw it out. They're French, by the way. So there's an agreement between Quebec and France that if like a French chef wants to come over, they can have open immigration. And Le Cordon Bleu is in Ottawa, right across the bridge from Hull.
Mhm.
So people live in Hull, Quebec, and then they go to Ottawa. So chef said, well, it is broken. You will have to throw it out. And I'm like looking like, my dog died. And he said, oh, do not worry. Sometimes I have to make things 20, 30 times before I get them right. And I thought, I'm only here this afternoon. So anyway, so we made our skate and we didn't have a sauce grabiche to go on it. I think my partner wanted to shoot me, but then I went out for dinner. That was the night I had the elk in Ottawa, and one of the courses I had sauce grabiche on it, and I took a bite and it was perfect, and I just wanted to cry.
Oh
So,
no.
but this is a long way of saying someone tells you, well, you're lacking in this, you go get it.
Yeah.
You figure it out. Maybe I didn't need to go to Le Cordon Bleu. Maybe I could have gone to something locally in Michigan. We have Schoolcraft College, which is very well thought of. It's a community college with a really good culinary program. But I don't, if I really want to do something, I don't let anybody block me from doing it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the way you've got to do it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. And
pretty
I think
much.
those were wise words too from the chef at Le Cordon Bleu that basically said, "Oh, don't
Yeah.
sweat it. It
Mhm.
happens
Yeah.
all the time."
Well, and I
And
think Bruno and Kyla would say on the show that they've made culinary. I think there's a little video that's up on their website right now where they talk about the mistakes that they've made.
Uh,
So
yep,
everyone who takes cooking seriously will make mistakes.
that is
absolutely. That's
why, sorry, go ahead, Christina.
I was just going to say that's how you learn
Yeah.
too, right? Is
Yeah.
by mistakes and by doing things and fixing things along the way. I mean, that's an important life
Yeah.
skill to have is just
I
keep
always
at
get
her.
frustrated. I'm just like, if it didn't work the first time, then I guess I can't
Yeah.
do that. But
Well,
you
I
do have
think
to try again.
so I'll give you an example. I made, one year I wanted to make panettone. I was taking care of my aunt and she loved panettone. And I thought instead of buying panettone, I'm going to make some.
You set
Well,
aside a few days.
first time it turned out that my kitchen was too cold
Mm.
because it wouldn't rise. That was the
Mhm.
first thing. The second time I figured out a solution, which is to let it rise in the oven.
Mhm.
If you have a gas oven, it's always a little bit warm. So I put it in to rise and I had forgotten to put the butter in it. So the third time I got it closer to okay, but then I realized after three tries I'd gone through a lot of ingredients, it'd taken an enormous amount of time. There were perfectly good panettones in those boxes from Italy, and I think we'll go with that. So, if you walk into the Great Canadian Superstore in Windsor, where I shop a lot, there's like a whole shelf full of panettone. So let the experts do
Yeah,
it.
let the experts
Sometimes.
do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yeah.
it is easier. And
Yeah.
especially for those like real specialty or things that are really time consuming or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think it's worth a shot. It's worth a shot. I mean, you will
Always.
understand what it is as you're messing it up. I
Mhm.
mean, you then appreciate I think the test of a great baker is a croissant, a plain butter croissant.
Mhm.
And those are really hard to make. They come out too tough. They come out too greasy, whatever. And you should know what a good one tastes like. And then if you try making it, it means that you appreciate the effort that goes
Mhm.
into it. So I would
Absolutely.
Oh,
never discourage anyone
definitely.
from making it. I would just say if you try it three or four times, it's not happening, move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Know
that's
that
what I
that's
was going
not
to
your
say
thing.
before is that that's why we have our baking craps that we like to post.
Yeah,
So people
yeah,
are aware, everybody is going to mess up. Not everything is perfect like on Instagram, right?
hmm,
We need to show all the stuff that
yeah,
got, not us necessarily, but everybody needs
Mhm.
to show what mistakes and learning opportunities they've had along the way to
hmm,
become really great at what they do so that then you do have those momentary good
yeah,
things that you can take a good
yeah,
picture of and
sure.
put on Instagram,
I
right?
mean, I think Julia Child said, figure out something and do it well. And you
Yes.
don't have to have a giant, even though her cookbook was 650 pages, you don't have to have a giant repertoire. So my mom, the first thing I learned to bake was apple crisp. And I continued to make apple crisp at least once a season ever since then. And her
Mhm.
recipe was very solid and I can make it by memory.
Yeah.
So I feel very confident doing that. And that always reassures me that I can master something here.
Yes, definitely. Those recipes that stand the test of time. And then when you've got them in your fingers, so you don't even have to think about what
Yeah,
you're doing. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. It's such a good
Exactly.
feeling. Yes.
Yeah.
Sauce gribiche is a cold egg sauce
Yeah.
made
Yeah.
by emulsifying hard-boiled egg yolks and mustard with a neutral oil like canola or grapeseed. And then it's finished with pickled cucumbers, capers, parsley, chervil, and tarragon.
Oh,
Hmm.
So I guess it's
Yeah.
the eggs and
Yes.
the getting it
Yeah.
emulsified is the difficult.
Yeah. It just curdles. If anything is too hot, what you're doing with it, that's the problem.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Ugh.
Temperature is so key to so many things, actually. Croissants, we were just talking about
hmm.
croissants. I mean, that is really key, is that temperature between your butter and your dough. And
Yeah.
when you do the lamination, just they have to be the same. It's all very, very tricky and well, not tricky. It's just it's
Well, it's
precise.
chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
chemistry,
there, I
science.
was watching the first episode of The Great British Bake Off. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch it yet, but
I
one
fell
of the
asleep to it
bakers
last night, but I
was
started.
I was watching one of the bakers and she said, "Oh, I never measure anything. I just throw it in." And I thought, "Wait a minute. This is baking. You have to measure. This is the point of baking. It isn't like cooking where you can throw in a little salt, taste, add a little more salt. You put too much salt in a bake, it's going to be awful."
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I was literally gasped when heard her say that. And I think that is one of the things that people need to know about baking until you can feel it,
Mhm.
in your fingertips. It isn't, you have to follow the recipe.
Yeah.
And you can adjust the recipe to your own taste, but
Mhm.
when you're mastering that recipe, you really need to use the measurements. It's very important.
Definitely.
Makes
It
sense.
it was interesting because like I said, I fell asleep while I was watching the first episode yesterday, but I was very excited to
Well, there's always fast forward.
it's I'm gonna go back and watch it, but yeah, it's always that's my favorite thing to fall asleep to. Actually, I just
Ah,
watch through all the
yeah,
seasons of British Bake Off and just
sure.
enjoy that. And I was like, oh, it's a new episode. Oh, thank goodness I
Yeah,
can watch this episode. And no, I could not stay awake, not because it was boring, but because it's comforting, and I got the
yeah.
chance to
Well,
relax.
that's good.
Um, but
Yeah.
having started watching it last night, and then read your article this morning about it. And so I was very excited that I actually had the opportunity
Yeah.
to watch at least part of it last night,
Yeah.
and then to see
Yeah,
your take on it.
I have to admit that I'll watch through the technical and then I don't really want to see all the angst of putting the showstopper together. I want to see the finished
Mm.
showstopper. So I usually will watch, I guess that would be about 30 minutes of it straight, and then I just sort of fast forward through the next 20 minutes until they take them up to Paul and Prue.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times the showstoppers are construction. They're
Mm.
not really baking.
Mm.
They're
Okay, yeah,
assembling
yeah,
or
yeah.
engineering or whatever.
Engineering.
And
Yeah.
so they're
Yeah.
doing
That's
all
fair.
these elaborate things, but it isn't teaching. I'm not going to go make a cake that looks like an aquarium. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
Why not? That
Especially,
sounds fun.
yeah, especially when it comes to like the illusion cakes, because I think that was the
Yeah.
showstopper, right?
Well,
Were the
so,
illusion cakes?
so I went back through a couple things I'd written about the Canadian baking show. Somebody did books. I think it was two
Mhm.
seasons ago. Someone did
Yes.
books.
That was, I think it was last season, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
last season.
Now
That,
these looked a little more sophisticated, and
And
obviously
you
you
could
could
pick them
take
up
them,
separately.
pick them
That's
yes.
up,
pretty
and
impressive.
Yeah.
but there were books in Canada last season.
Yeah. I
So it
think
just,
Camilla
yeah, I
had
think
done
it
books.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it just goes to show you that the Canadian show is ahead of the Brits for whatever reason. We
There
can
you
talk
go.
about that. I have a couple theories
Yeah.
about that
And
Okay, I
too.
want to hear it.
And one of the interesting things you mentioned in your article was you think Paul Hollywood's getting a little soft.
I thought he was, so I noticed this last season that he had been less gruff, and I thought this time he was sounding a lot more like Bruno
Mm.
than the Paul Hollywood of a couple of years ago. That his criticism used to be brutal,
Hmm.
and this time it was sort of a backhanded compliment and then brutal. He didn't want to totally devastate the contestants. And
Hmm.
I think they've heard the criticism.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so last year it was a little milder. And also I think Allison Hammond, it softens things up anyway.
Yeah, she's
She's really been a
very fun.
nice,
Mhm.
nice addition to the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you go back, way back to the beginning of the Great British Baking Show, because we didn't get the Americans didn't get the first two seasons. Did they run in Canada? Do you know?
I've been able to watch them. I could see them on
Okay,
CBC, I think. Yeah.
because Ed the Boy Who Bakes won the first season,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
we've never seen that one here.
Oh, that's too
Yeah, so I've never
bad.
seen those first two seasons, and they only picked up with three, which the third season in Canada, or sorry, in the UK. And Paul, it was when Mary was there. Paul was very nice, very polite.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So like three, four, five, six-ish, and I think when Mary left,
Mhm.
that he was left to kind of his own devices, and Prue wasn't strong enough the first couple of years to stand up to him, or wasn't used to TV or
Yeah,
whatever.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he kind of ran. I mean, that's just my theory. They kind of ran away with things. What impression do you all have of
Oh,
him?
I've always kind of wondered because I know that there were issues which led to they switched what is it, production companies or what was it that ended up Mary Berry ended up leaving
Oh,
or
so they were on the
they didn't,
BBC and they went to
right?
Channel 4.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
she
Mary
didn't
Berry
she didn't
didn't
want to
want to
be
do
on
that.
Channel 4.
So
Yeah.
that's how they ended up getting Prue in there. And I've always kind of wondered about how Paul Hollywood felt about that,
Yeah.
because I think the team of Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood was so good. I mean, the whole entire team with like Mel and Sue and everybody, that was such a great Mel, was that? Yeah. It
Hmm.
was such a
Oh,
great
Mel and
way.
Sue. Yeah, I love
Yeah, yeah.
them.
They were
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And then you always kind of wonder about how that's going to change as you get the different hosts coming in, and then you get a different
Right.
judge coming in, not the male judge, but you get a different female judge
Female
coming
judge.
in.
Yeah.
And he's been the constant through all of it, and he's the only constant.
Yeah.
And just kind of wonder if maybe he's thinking, okay, well, I need to change it up a little bit because I'm the only one who's left from the beginning, and maybe they're
Yeah.
getting a little bored with me, so maybe I should change things. I
So
don't
I
know.
don't know what he does in addition to the show. He talks about having worked in his parents' bakery, I think,
Mhm.
Yeah,
but I don't know if he's cooking anywhere.
I
he
don't
goes.
know.
He does another
Probably a
show that
celebrity.
traveling one where he travels around and
Okay.
sees a bunch of different places where he learns how to make or practices making things with people. Or
Oh, okay.
I've only seen
Yeah.
like half an episode of one of those, but yeah, no, I have no idea what. Seems very private.
Yeah, we're Prue
That's
Leith.
a
I
lot of,
mean, Prue's got a million business ventures, and
yeah.
Yeah.
so I feel like she's got a more rounded life maybe than he does. I mean, if he's just a television presenter now, then
Mm.
and not really what I mean, I should put it a different way. If he's not active in the industry and
Mhm.
in the cooking
Yeah.
industry, baking industry, then his perspective is now that of someone who hosts versus
Yeah.
someone who's actually going to work in a
I mean, that's
in a
Yeah.
kitchen.
definitely what he's most known for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But I think I have
yeah.
a theory on maybe why maybe he's perceived to be a little bit softer these days. I mean,
Uh-huh.
honestly, I think the caliber of bakers season over season has just improved so much. So
Yeah.
that bar of where they start even is so
Hmm.
high already that I
Yeah.
think, the caliber of bakes that they are putting out, even the first episode, are
Right.
so much better than the first episode would have been like even like 3 seasons ago. The
Yeah.
bakers have just advanced so much and their technical skill
Uh-huh.
is mind blowing. I mean, for them
So
to be
true.
doing illusion cakes in the showstopper of the very first
Yeah, that's crazy.
episode is
Hmm.
that's crazy, right?
Yeah, and some of those
A
were
lot.
wonderful. I liked the sewing machine. And I was impressed by the folded pair of jeans, but
Mhm.
not blown away by it.
Mhm.
And then the books I thought were pretty incredible too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that the whole idea of the books being able to be separate from each other was that's
Mhm.
pretty impressive.
Very
Yeah, but I do think that CBC Baking is way ahead on
We're okay with
both its showstoppers and the technicals and there's so many things in reading back over a couple of seasons, there's so many things with international flavors that
Mhm.
mm,
CBC Baking will incorporate into
yes.
those challenges. I have to
Without
look a
just
lot of those things up. I have no idea what some of these
it's
things are.
true. And
right.
without making it like some kind of I know that there have been some controversy over the racial undertones or racist
Mhm.
undertones of some of the weeks that they've had on British.
Hmm.
And yeah, we've been able to have the Canadian show incorporate all of these different types of cultures and bakes in the true like melting pot type of, idea
Mhm.
that Canada is supposed to be representative of. So, did I say that right? Is it melting pot? It's not
Melting pot's
English,
good.
right?
That
It's
works.
Yeah.
melting
Yeah.
pot.
Diversity, melting pot. Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I've been saying the same thing to my husband over the last little while because he always wants to know. He's like, "Well, could you be on the British show if you can't get on the Canadian show?" And I'm like, "Well, I would have to live there, so that would, make a
Well,
big
do
change
you
in
have a
our
British
lives."
background or would
No,
you?
Dutch and
Oh, but
Danish.
they do have an American this time on Great Britain. She lives there. So I
He,
guess you'd have to go live
yes,
there
yeah.
Yeah.
someday.
I
Have to live
guess it's
there.
if you have to live
Yeah.
if you do live there.
Because
But
it's
I said
interesting
it
that
to me.
Kyla lives
She,
in London
she
Mhm.
and then
does, and she
comes
comes in.
over to
Yes.
do the Canadian show. But she's
She does.
Canadian, but
Yeah.
Yes. But
right.
the whole idea of you saying that, the Canadian versions or the Canadian bakes are a bit more evolved, perhaps.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
feel the same way. And I've been saying that to my husband. I'm like, that I want to do a challenging show. Like, and I feel like a
Hmm.
lot of the stuff on British has not been as
No.
challenging as what's on Canadian, you know?
No, and I
And
think, for example, I mean, Cake Week, Bread Week, they'll probably do Chocolate Week again. I mean, we've all seen the lion that's made out of bread, and that's kind of the gold standard. And who's ever going to do another lion made out of bread? I mean,
oh,
let's do something else. I think they could do, I think they have done, they've done French pastry, they've done Danish, entremont, that kind of stuff. So they're trying to mix it up, but they still do fall back on
mm,
the same old, same old. And it's just getting a little bit stale, no pun
yeah.
intended.
Well, they've been at it for what? This
It's
is
a bread
their
week fun.
Yeah.
Yay.
well,
I'm
because
okay with that.
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
many seasons are they? This is season
This
15.
is,
six,
yeah,
15,
15. This is
15?
15.
15, 13 for us.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so
So
you do
that's all
run
they're
about. But the
changing.
thing is, they haven't done any of the stuff. Like I was looking back through last season and remember the bun challenge and Loic did that tree of buns,
Yeah, the tree of
and
abundance.
the tree of abundance. Yeah, and so we're very lucky where I am in Ann Arbor that we have a bunch of Asian bakeries. So
Mm.
we have two locally based ones. One, the young woman has roots in Taiwan, and then the other one are Korean immigrants. And then we have a Two Le Jour, which is a chain from Korea. And so we are we are overflowing with buns here in Ann Arbor. And
You
there's
have
so
a
many
true
different
abundance.
we have abundance of buns. And there's so many different flavors. You can do the peanut filling, you can do red bean filling, you can do matcha filling, you can do chocolate. But probably a couple I'm missing, just like a cream filling, peanut butter, that sort of thing. And they've never done anything like that
Mhm.
they do British buns, the Great British Bun Off. They'll do what they know, like a Chelsea bun, which is a
Yeah.
sweet roll in America. But they have not. They try to tread into international flavors. They get murdered every time they
They
do. I
do.
mean,
Yeah, they
to
do.
to
Yes.
Mexico week and Japan week, and they tried doing Indian from India sweets at one point, and they just don't because I don't think the bakers themselves have the sort of sophistication maybe that
Mm.
Canadians on the show do. Um,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because the Canadian contestants come from a huge area. I mean,
Hmm.
this time there's the first person from New Brunswick, and there's
Yes.
someone
She's
from
our
Quebec.
girl.
She's our
Yeah.
friend.
She's our
Oh,
friend.
she
Friend of
is.
the
Oh,
show. Yes.
fantastic. Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a gentleman who's from Sagaway, I think, way up in
Ebony.
Quebec,
Yeah.
way north in Quebec. Like, so my relatives are from Chateauguay, which is south of Montreal. And he's from way up there and I'm like, how does he know how to do this stuff? But I mean, I don't want to say it wrong, but I mean, it's not like he's lives in Toronto or
Yeah,
lives
yeah.
in Ottawa and has gone to Le Cordon Bleu. So how will he handle
Mhm.
something totally different from his area?
Yeah.
And they've got people from Western Canada and people from Toronto and people from elsewhere in Ottawa and it's or sorry, in Ontario. And it's kind of like, how come you have this far-flung, enormous country, and yet they nail the sophistication on a lot of these bakes?
Mhm.
Which I give a big hand to Bruno and Colin, a big hand to the producers
Mhm.
for coming up with all these challenges and for these bakers and being able to interpret them.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think part of that is, first of all, the Great Canadian Baking Show has had those themes for quite some time. So I
Right.
think people who are fans of the show or bakers that want to get on the show kind of
Right.
understand the range of which they have to at least
Mhm.
understand how the flavors work together or the different techniques depending on what they're asked to bake. I know a lot of people, Lisa included,
Yeah.
she does all the bakes every single season. So she does a signature, she does the technical, she does the showstopper for Great Canadian Baking Show. And she's been doing that for season on season on season.
Yeah.
And I suspect that there are a lot of other bakers who do the same thing, or they'll do something that they're not that familiar with. So I think
Hmm.
that's one thing. I think the other thing is social media
Yeah.
has allowed people to have access to so many different things and flavors. And so the world
Hmm.
has become a lot smaller in terms of
Hmm. Hmm.
all of that too.
Yeah.
And Amazon is great too because you can access anything anytime. They'll deliver to your doorstep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So interesting flavors, different tools, all that kind of stuff is so much more accessible these days versus even pre-COVID. So those are, I think, a few of the reasons why I think maybe there's a lot.
Mhm.
There's high expectations, but there's also a high level of execution these
You know,
days in things.
yeah. And I know that with everybody who is interested in baking and these baking shows in particular, they're watching all the other shows. So
Hmm.
we're watching all
Hmm.
the Australian,
Absolutely.
all the
Yeah.
British. I'm taking notes all the
Yeah.
time. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Oh, that's something I
Yeah.
want to
The
make next
Australian
time.
version is very interesting.
It is very
Yeah,
interesting.
because it's different seasons. I
Mhm.
mean, now it's spring in
Yeah.
Australia, different fruits that are available, different traditions that are available. And so
Yes.
that
Yes.
makes it very interesting to me. I've
Yes.
never been there, and now I'm like, I think I need to go to Australia.
Right?
I
Yes.
know.
So,
I'm really enjoying because we've got Australian started and then British started and now Canadian's going to be starting.
yeah,
Starting.
yeah,
By the time this airs, it'll be on for a while. But yeah, they're all at the same time, and we
Mhm.
have found ways to access them. And so it's like being in three different worlds at the same time, And
yeah.
the Australian,
It's really a great education. And when you think about
Mhm.
it, I mean, my mother didn't watch Julia Child for whatever reason. So I didn't really grow up with, Julia. They would have been reruns anyway. So I didn't really grow up with her. We had Natalie Dupre, who was she's still around. She's a Southern baker. She was on. And then Jacques Pepin would
Mhm.
come on, and we loved Jacques. And then the Baking with Julia program. That was kind of the first one I remembered. And as it turned out, Dory Greenspan was her assistant for Baking with Julia. So Dory kind of met up with Julia at the very end of Julia's career. But
Mhm.
you would have to watch public television, and we watched Channel 9 in Windsor, and we got shows from Canada. And then we had YouTube come along finally, which gave people, but that's relatively recent when you think
Mhm.
about it. But
Definitely.
not for the contestants. I mean, the contestants were able to grow up with videos and YouTube and all that. Although some of the contestants I think are even older than I am. So, which is going to be fun to see some
It's great.
seniors
Mhm.
on there. I loved it. I think it was who is Rajon?
Rajan.
John.
Rajon who said I'm 1,000 years old, and I thought, no, no, you're not. But to
Probably.
have him and Rita and
Ooh,
they're
yes.
who's retired. I think they're both
Yes.
retired, and it's
Yeah.
kind of like those people on the Great British Bake Off would last like, oh yeah, pat you on the head, and you're gone after the second week. But hopefully, one of the two of them will last through most of the
Mm.
season. And I think that's really good for the younger bakers. Like one of the bakers on Great British Bake Off is 18, and that's fine. And, Martha from 10 years ago or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
she was very good, but she
Yeah.
was 18. And
Mhm.
so we've been able to watch their careers, but I think it's also very inspirational to see people who are new to baking and who have been baking a long time, but never would have thought of competing in a
Yeah.
show like
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
So,
It's awesome.
yeah,
I think one of the bakers on the Aussie one, Molly, I think, is 16.
16.
yeah, yeah.
And if you have you watched the Aussie one
I
at all?
I
Are
have watched a few of them. I haven't watched the whole season, but
Okay.
it really I just I know there are lots of baking kids. My nephews who are now grown-ups loved baking pies, loved baking cookies, and would bring my mother when she was alive. Parker, my nephew, would bring her dozens and dozens of cookies,
Nice.
and she would eat them, with a smile on her face, like a
Good
very
job.
proud,
Good job,
proud
Grandma.
grandmother. But
Totally.
let's
Because
just
how
say
much
at 28, he's a better baker than he was when he was 12. So,
for sure. And but what
Usually.
I mean, we talk about that often on this on our podcast of how much, food is love
yeah,
and
absolutely.
and how much joy it does bring people. So I'm sure your mom was
Oh,
so
yeah,
happy not only to have a tasty little bite, but the fact that it was made by her grandson, right? It just it's
Yeah.
so
sure.
special.
Oh, that
Well, and
means so
he's a
much.
terrific pie baker, and so he's moved. I've
Mm.
given him a bunch of cookbooks, and he's moved on to pie. So for our Thanksgiving, he always is the pie baker, which I think
Nice.
is very
That's
appreciated since
wonderful.
I'm not a great pie baker. But it is you sit there and you go, how can they be good? And then you realize if this is what they love doing, I mean, some kids are into Legos,
Yep.
Yep.
some kids are into video games, some kids like to go skateboarding or ride scooters or whatever. These are the baking kids.
Mhm.
And that's exciting for,
I
especially
love
for
that
me,
for
having been
sure.
a professor, to see
Mhm.
kids get lit up about something. I think
Yeah.
that's really great.
Yeah. And Loic was talking about how he would really like to eventually host a kids baking show, like
Sure.
the
Yeah.
Canadian version, like the kids version of the Great Canadian Baking Show. And with him being
Mhm.
a teacher and him having this baking
Yeah.
experience and everything, I think it's just such a good fit. And I'm really hoping that eventually he
Yeah.
gets that because I think we would all really enjoy watching that.
I would love it.
Sure.
Yeah.
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 In
That'd be
fact, I
Yeah.
love watching the kids baking championships that they have
hmm
down in the States.
hmm
And I think the British Bake Off had a spin-off
yes.
with
Yeah,
kids
and
as
they have
well.
Junior Bake
MasterChef
Off.
Junior,
Yeah,
yeah,
Master
over
Chef.
there. And th
Yeah.
those are always really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Except
Yeah.
when
And
they cry. It's
Yeah.
really
well,
Well,
hard.
you
adults
can't
cry
blame them.
too. Adults cry
I
Yeah.
too.
don't care
But
that much
Sure.
when the adults cry.
but
Right.
it's kind of sad when
Yeah,
anybody
I still
leaves
do.
the show.
I want to
Yeah.
cry every time they cry too. So
But the
Yeah.
I
kids, I think it hurts more, I
it
think, when
does,
you see the
hmm
especially
show.
as moms, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be a really good time for us to play a little game.
Ooh.
Are
Ooh, a
you
Are
ready
game?
you
to
in?
play this or
Sure.
that?
Is there music? Is there like ding 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 ding?
I used to add the music to it
Uh,
when I was editing in a certain program, but now I don't because I don't have that program anymore.
okay,
But I
sure.
want to.
But
So,
we could.
That's called a sting in public radio.
oh,
The
okay.
little music signature. Yeah, it's a
Oh,
Well,
sting.
Christina has a sting. Okay. We're gonna
Okay.
play this or that.
that.
Okay.
No, the
Yeah.
Jeopardy song.
Oh,
There we go. Okay.
That good?
First
Okay.
question.
Let's start it off with a nice simple one and no judgment on these. You can answer any which way you'd like.
sure. Yeah.
Coffee or tea?
Oh, Thai. So let me tell you my tea story. I grew up drinking Red Rose, and we
Mm-hmm.
had to buy it in Canada. So my
Oh,
mother
yeah.
had business in Windsor, Ontario. So we lived in Ann Arbor, and we drove to Windsor about once a month. We children, my brother and I, were let loose on Olette Avenue in downtown Windsor, when my mother did her business. There was a Maynard candy shop in Smith's department store. And my brother and I had to go to Maynard's candy shop every time we were in Windsor. And so the saleswoman grew to know us, and we would open the door and she would say, "Here come the Maynard children." So when we were in Windsor, we always stopped at the Dominion store, which very much aged me. But we always took home black diamond cheese, a box of those maple cookies, the dare, are
Mhm.
they dare cookies with the maple filling,
Yeah, I think
and
so.
a
Yeah.
box of red rose tea, because red rose in Canada is different from red rose in America. I
Mhm.
had the little China things inside, and I
Oh,
still actually have a couple of those little animals on my shelves that my mother somehow had saved. So red rose tea, but I like coffee. I have a Chemex, a Be Honey Mocha Pot, an espresso, and I kind of rotate. And I only drink coffee in the morning,
Yep.
so I'll have a cup of coffee. And depending on how impatient I am, it will be either an espresso for a really fast cup, or Bialetti or Chemex, if I've got more time. So
Wow.
I
sounds
have
like
to. So I have
Christina.
to say Thai. I
I
have to
was
say
gonna
Thai.
say,
It's
you
a
and I are
tie.
almost the same person.
Yeah, that sounds like exactly how Christina and Stay go. And then she's tea for the whole entire rest of the day.
Yep. And then I switch over to my tea.
Yeah, and tea warms you up.
Mhm.
I don't know how cold it is where you both are, but it used to be that Michigan would get cold. We
Mhm.
don't really get as cold as we once did, but we would be out walking around, skating, loved to go ice skating, did a little bit of sledding, that sort of thing. And you come home and coffee does not warm you up. Tea warms you up.
Tea
Yeah.
warm.
So if you're really cold in the winter, have a cup of tea.
Yeah. Or a cup of hot cocoa.
Yeah,
Cocoa's
that too.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
that wasn't a question though.
Sorry so I've already
That's
taken too
okay.
That
much
was a
time,
Yeah,
but
no,
bonus.
no, it's fine. Okay, second question. Cars or cuisine?
so I discovered something during the UAW strike last year.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you all are aware that the United Auto Workers Union
Mhm.
struck some of the car companies here in the States. And
Yes. Yeah.
so I was called on to be a talking head during all of that, and did a bunch of appearances on media. And people really wanted my car expertise. I do a fraction of that number of cooking appearances, because there's so many people that do this that
Mhm.
didn't start, 7 years ago, that started 35 years
Right,
ago.
right.
So I would say my heart is in cuisine, my head is in automotive.
That's
How's
completely
that for an
fair.
Yep.
answer?
That's
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's a
totally
great
fair.
answer.
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. This, let's see where this one goes. British Bake Off or the Great Canadian Baking Show?
Oh, please. There's no comparison. The Great Canadian Baking Show. For
Okay.
me personally, I
Yeah,
know
that makes
I
me
know
happy though.
Yes.
TBBO is the franchise.
Yeah.
And if Mary and Paul and Mel and Sue were still there, I
Mhm.
might give them the nod. But I think, everyone adores Bruno. So the way I have to tell you, the way I got to know the
Mhm.
show was my friend Heidi Jacobs, who's a novelist professor at the University of Windsor. We were meeting for coffee, and she said, "Have you been watching the Great Canadian Baking Show?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you need to start watching it." She's a great baker herself. She's really loves to cook. And so I started 2.5 seasons ago. I came in the middle and immediately said, "Oh, I like this." And then I watched the rest of that season, and then all of last year, and obviously, or all of the next 2 years. And then obviously, we're about to start, as we're taping, the
Mhm.
new season. So,
Yes.
yeah, only because I just think that the British show has gotten kind of stale. And,
Mhm.
I've used that term before, but I just feel like it needs a good kick up. of,
Okay.
because
That's fair. Yeah.
it's diverse enough, but I don't think it's diverse. I don't think the diversity weaves through
Mhm.
it. And of course, it's British and it's supposed to be, British
Mhm.
and
Quintessentially British. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's yeah, that's part of the brand, and I get it. But Britain is a very diverse place. We really had a Scot on. I mean, so I have a little bit of a Scottish background in
Good.
addition
Yeah.
to French, and we really had a Scot on there that's done very interesting. A few show up every so often,
Yeah.
but there's a whole sort of area of Scottish cuisine, and we haven't really even seen Scotland, Wales, the islands.
Mhm.
Hmm.
None of that feels like it's been represented. And
Yeah.
I think they could be doing more with to show Britain as more diverse as just, tea cakes and Victoria Sponge and all
Yeah. I
that.
was gonna say Victoria Sponge. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do that every season.
Yeah.
Victoria Sponge comes out at least one bake.
We
Yeah.
did. So when we were stuck at home during COVID, there's the Great Brits Food Superstore is a website, and they sell these greens cake mixes from England, and there's a Victoria Sponge cake mix.
Mhm.
And so I ordered that, and my I was taking care of my aunt who passed away a couple of years ago at 94. So we're at home, like trying to keep our spirits up, and I was baking like crazy, and like we'd have dessert every night. So I made a lot of Victoria sponges because
Mm.
Yeah.
they're so easy to make. And
Mhm.
you're forced to eat them because they won't keep that long.
Right.
Yeah, darn.
Yeah, I
Too
know.
bad.
I know.
All
Terrible.
right. Well, this
Terrible.
is not a good question for me. Can you ask this
Oh,
one, Christina?
You want me to ask this one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think I know the answer to this one, but tigers, lions, Red Wings, or Pistons?
oh, Tigers. Oh my gosh. I was at a game yesterday. I mean, I went to like the Thursday game when the Tigers were wrapping up the season and they ended up one game away from the playoffs. And then I went to the last game of the season and I saw them play the Dodgers in the summer. I mean, I've just been a Tiger fan since birth. My dad was a Red Wings fan, so
Okay.
I learned hockey from sitting in the basement with my papa watching Hockey Night in Canada.
Yes.
So yeah,
Da, da,
so
We had them
my
in
da,
our house.
da, da,
da.
da, da, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
at least
And
I know
so
that part.
yeah, and so my mom, like if they didn't go out on Saturday night, he wanted to sit and watch hockey,
Mhm.
and she didn't want to watch hockey. My brother doesn't like sports. And so one when I was maybe 6 or 7, she said, go down in the basement with your papa and watch Hockey Night in Canada. And of course, I knew nothing about, no, I knew nothing about hockey. And so he started to explain hockey to me. And it was I'm glad I learned it as a child because I probably wouldn't bother now.
Mm.
So I gained that understanding of hockey at a very young age, and I had this crush on Ken Dryden. I don't know if you know who he
Oh,
was,
Ken
but
Dryden, the goalie from the
Ken
Montreal
from
Canadiens.
Montreal Canadiens, and
Yes.
a McGill, I think McGill graduate and a lawyer,
Mhm.
had this amazing post hockey career,
Yeah.
but very tall and very smart. And I thought that's like the ideal man for me. Of course, I never met him or anything, but I just was sort of enraptured by the idea that a college graduate who's as smart as he was playing hockey.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. My love was Wayne Gretzky. I had a poster of him
oh,
on
sure.
my
Yeah,
wall growing up. Like I
absolutely.
just loved him. It's yeah.
Well, and here, Gordie Howe is an icon, and
Yeah,
so
of
they're building
course.
a brand new bridge between Detroit and Windsor, and they're calling it the Gordie Howe
Oh,
International Bridge. So
Wow.
he's long gone, and he hadn't nobody had seen him play hockey for years, but very, very warmly remembered in these
yeah,
parts.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, these
Yeah,
a lot of these athletes do so much for their cities as well.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Well,
So
there's a Wayne Gretzky Arena. Is it in Brampton? There's some kind like I've driven by it on the way to Toronto. So, so he's very well admired
oh
as
yeah,
well. So, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and as far as football, I mean, so my problem with football, so I don't mind college football, although
Mhm.
college football is becoming very, very commercial now,
Mm.
is the head injuries. And
Yes.
so I watched this documentary on Frontline on public television about 10 years ago called League of Denial. And it was all about the CTE, I think it's called, injuries that the men are
Mhm.
getting to their brains,
Yeah.
and it's shortening their lives. And that was just sort of it for me with football. And basketball. I like to watch the college, the March
Mhm.
Madness and all
Yes.
that. And I love women's basketball,
Mhm.
but I'm just nah. If I have a choice, it's always baseball.
Always baseball.
Always baseball. Yeah.
All right. Writing about business or writing about food?
Oh, right, writing about food.
Sounds like
Um,
it since you wanted to be a
Writing
food
about
writer.
business is much more lucrative. I have to be
Mhm.
honest. Don't do this if you want to be rich, unless you're, unless you're Dory. I don't even know if Dory's rich. I mean, I don't know how much money the famous cookbook writers are making. So I heard this story once about how many people who write their first cookbooks go into the red
Mhm.
because you don't get a very big advance.
Mhm.
They want you to have a big social media following. You have to pay for the photography. And so photography for a cookbook can cost 50 or $60,000. And so you're
Whoa.
in the red before the book goes on sale. And you've got to pray that it sells really well. And it's just a real uphill battle. And
Mhm.
people still do it. I mean,
Yeah.
people
Yep.
love to have a cookbook published, but it's you better do it as a labor of love.
Yeah.
So for
There goes
me,
our idea.
automotive, I'm the car lady. I mean, everyone knows me as that, and so I can definitely keep doing that forever, Richmond till I die.
Yeah.
But I love writing about the people as much and the trends and
Mhm.
things like that in
Yeah.
food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Um, Cake or pie?
Pie,
Yeah.
mainly because I don't care for frosting or icing.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I was looking at something, I think it was a King Arthur post today on Instagram, and it was a chocolate cupcake with just gobs of espresso flavored frosting.
Mm.
And I thought, ugh. At first I'd have to shove aside the frosting to get to the cake. I mean, plain cake, absolutely. Like there's little one layer cakes, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Mhm.
But pie, any pie over most cakes, I have to
Yes.
say. Yeah.
And do you have a favorite type of pie that you enjoy?
Oh, it kind of depends. My mom loved lemon meringue, and I like a
Mm.
really good lemon meringue. So there's a place in in Ontario, called Parks Blueberries. It's between London and Windsor. So it's sort of like I don't even know what the towns are on the 401. I just know that okay, we get off here to get gas, and we
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
off here to go to
Yep.
Parks Blueberries.
Yep.
So it might be Thames, Thames, Ontario, and you get off the 401 and you dive through some cornfields, and then you find a road and make a left, and you get to Parks Blueberries. And in the summertime, it's pick your own blueberries. And then the
Oh.
rest of the time, it's amazing baked goods and pie, and they have frozen pies, and they have mini pies.
Mm.
So, you know, little pies in little boxes that you can bring back and put in the freezer. And then when you want pie, you get out one of those little mini pies. So I
Yeah.
guess I would say fruit pie. I
Mhm.
don't like stuff that's super sweet. I don't like a lot of whipped cream. I
Mhm.
don't like, those pies that have macarons and stuff stuck on top of them. No, just give me a nice, or a
Great.
butter tart, I went to when I was in Windsor. There's a place in Windsor called the Riverside Pie Cafe, and all they have is pie, which
Mhm.
is heaven.
Mhm.
And they do butter tarts, and they do pecan, and they do plain, and they probably have raisins, but raisins. Um, so
Well,
I'm
there goes
definitely
our
not.
questions.
There
I
goes our
am
last
not
question.
team raisin at all. So you go into Riverside Pie Cafe, and you can walk out with like they have like a pie flight. I mean, you can get like four kinds of pie. So
Wow.
that's one of my favorite stops now in Windsor is
That's
Riverside. So
When my
yeah.
husband's cousin got married, they just asked everybody not everybody, but a bunch of people in the family to bring a few pies. So there
Oh, that's
was no cake.
fantastic.
It was just all this big
Yeah,
table
yeah,
full of
yeah.
pies.
Oh,
That's
fun.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
So do you know about the wedding cookie tables in Pennsylvania? Have you heard about this? Okay.
No.
Oh,
So there is a wedding table cookie Facebook page. And in Pennsylvania, mostly around Pittsburgh, the tradition is that you have a buffet table at your wedding of cookies,
Oh,
all
that's
all
fun.
different kinds of cookies, and the bride has to count on a dozen cookies per guest. And they do
Oh,
give you little boxes to take them home, but you'll see these long buffet tables and they're set with 10 or 15 different kinds of cookies. And so mothers and bridesmaids and all that will spend weeks before the wedding baking cookies.
that's
And then
incredible.
these ladies, so
Right.
these are the ladies that discovered the defective Hershey's Kisses a couple of years ago. So I don't know
Oh,
if you heard this story, but
I have
I'd
no.
say
not
5 years
this
ago or
drama.
so. Yeah. So apparently I figured it out. I mean, I was reading about this and I had kind of figured out, okay, I think I know what happened. But the ladies in Pittsburgh were making what are called peanut butter blossoms. So
Mhm,
they're those peanut butter cookies, and you smush a Hershey's
mhm.
Kiss in the middle of them, and then when they're warm, and then it kind of
Yeah.
warms up the Hershey's Kiss. So they were getting unwrapping the Hershey's Kisses, and they were all stumpy, like the little points were not
Off.
there.
Oh,
Oh,
So they were
they're
coming out instead of, pointy, they were coming out flattened. And the ladies were like, something is wrong with these kisses. And so they wrote to Hershey's, and Hershey said, oh, no, 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 you got a bad batch of kisses. So they're all in Pennsylvania, right? So
mhm.
I went to the store in Michigan and I bought kisses, and they were stumpy. And I thought they've had a manufacturing change because
Uh-huh.
it doesn't make sense that they've been making these kisses for 90 years and all of a sudden they're stumpy. And
Mhm.
I thought, I bet they're using new machinery or a new formula or something. So the ladies didn't give up, and they finally got a hold of a representative of Hershey's who admitted that they had made a manufacturing change and
Whoa.
apologized profusely. And they sent everyone who had Stumpy Kisses, gift certificate for a good bag of kisses. And the kisses have never been stumpy ever since then.
so they changed back or
So they had changed stamping or something, like whatever, the cookies come out, like they
Mhm.
put the chocolate in and roll them out or whatever, and something had something had been changed, and it was cutting off the tops of
And
the.
of course, they wouldn't notice because they get wrapped by machines as
They get
well.
wrapped by machine. They
Yeah.
would have never, and they didn't pull them off the assembly line, which they
Mhm.
should have to check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the ladies
Quality
in
control.
so
Yeah,
the
where
wedding
was
table cookie
Juicy?
people were like Jessica Fletcher on Murder She Wrote, and they got to the bottom of it, and I wrote about it, and that was kind of fun. So anyway,
Nobody
that was.
wants stumpy kisses at their wedding.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
No.
imagine if you had those maple leaf cookies and all the stems were cut off. I mean,
Right?
so but this is just to tell you and your audience about this wedding table cookie tradition in
It's a really
Pennsylvania.
cool idea.
That's very cool.
It's very
It's almost like a cookie exchange during the
kind
holiday
of
season, kind
kind
of.
of, yeah, yeah, except that it's a free for all cookie
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah, you don't have to
like
actually, as a guest, you
yeah.
probably don't have to bake the cookies. You
Yeah, yeah.
just
No, 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 no. And sometimes it's the gift, like the father of the groom, mother of the groom, sorry, will say, let us bake the cookies.
Hmm.
And then that spares the expense. Because butter's expensive, eggs are expensive,
Oh,
Oh
yes.
yeah.
nuts cost the earth.
Yes.
And the cookies are just amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
so everybody posts photos of their cookies and they make those little cookies. And we've seen a little bit of it on the baking show where they take the sweets and melt them down and it becomes like glass, like for
Mhm.
windows in a
Yeah, the windows,
gingerbread house.
stained glass
And there's
windows.
apparently a whole type of cookie that has that clear, like they're little square shortbreads,
Mhm.
and then they lay in this translucent melted candy, and they're
Oh.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
I don't have the time, but they do. God bless them.
That's
Yep.
amazing.
So
That's
Yep.
incredible.
Someone's
And
got
I
to
yeah.
do it.
The other cool thing as well is what a great way to showcase like any family traditions, cookies, flavors, that
Sure.
kind of thing as well that you can incorporate is in such a personal way to a wedding.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's some kind of a cookie called it's like what we would call a cream horn, and
Hmm.
it's you wrap it around like a little rod.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're I guess they're puff pastry, and then
Yes, they
you
are. Yeah.
pull the things off, and then you fill it. I should do that differently. You fill it with chocolate flavor or anise flavor or something, lemon, that kind of thing.
Mm,
So
mhm.
that there's always those cream horns
Yeah.
on
Of
a
cream.
cookie table.
Yum.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
so good. What a
Oh,
great idea.
I
yeah.
know. I like that idea too. Hmm. Okay. Savory or sweet?
It depends. This
Okay,
is so
that's a fair
bad.
answer. You're allowed to
So
say
okay,
totally
so I'll
fair.
give you an example. I yesterday I was on my way back from Detroit, and we have these fantastic Middle Eastern bakeries on the way home in Dearborn, Michigan. And I
Mhm.
went into Shatila, which is a very well-known one here, and they had one section of the cases that was savory and one that was sweet, and I got a little bit of both. I
Mhm.
got little cheese-filled pastries, which I ate for breakfast. And then I got some kind of do you know what Knefa is? So I think it
Yes.
was a
Cafe, yes.
challenge. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Knefa, they had a Knefa that was topped with Nutella, like
Oh.
little swirls of Nutella. And I had like just a square of it this morning, and it's incredibly rich, so you can only have a
Yeah.
bite of that. But yeah, I mean, I have to say the bakeries in Dearborn really do well at both. So I think a lot of American baking is way too sweet.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I would say so too.
like all those cakes with the piles of whipped cream and frosting and all that. And like sometimes you'll see like, oh, look at our 6-layer chocolate cake. And it's like, no, I just I don't like I know people think I'm crazy. I don't like frosting, and I don't like anything that's just piles of sweet.
Yeah.
So I mean, if I had to choose, I guess I would choose savory,
Mhm.
but chocolate. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Savory, but chocolate. Yeah.
savory and dark chocolate.
I like it. I mean,
Yeah.
that works. Dark chocolate's practically savory anyway.
Yeah, in a way. That's, if you get above 70%,
Mhm.
it's
Enough.
not even a treat, really.
Yeah.
Fair. Baking or cooking?
Cooking,
Yeah.
unfortunately, not good for your podcast, but
That's fine.
Hey,
yeah.
we've asked that question to a few of
Yeah.
our guests who kind of do both. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's all
I would
good.
say 70% cooking, 30% baking.
Okay.
About. Yeah.
That seems like good balance, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll cook dinner. I mean, so I try to cook at least 2 out of 3 meals every single day. I mean, I do have to eat out because it's research, so to
Hmm.
speak.
Darn.
What a
But
job.
I
Yeah,
know
it's so tough.
staying on top of trends. Yeah. But I'm actually quite close, I'm not a vegetarian, I'm like a chickatarian,
A
but I
proletarian.
a pouletarian, I like that, a pouletarian. But I don't eat a lot of meat, and I will be very happy just eating vegetarian as long as I can have some dairy.
Yeah, yeah.
So like tonight I'm having spinach pie for dinner
Nice.
with some
Yes.
Mm,
rice.
sounds good.
And I'm okay without, oh shoot, that council that sponsors the show is not going to like this, but no, like great, you like when you watch the commercials in Canada, I think this is very funny. They always stress that it's made from like 100% great
Hmm.
Canadian beef, like
Yep,
the
yep.
McDonald's commercials, and I'm like, you wouldn't do that in America. I mean,
Mm.
nobody would say made from 100% American beef. I mean, but I realize that the farming community's got to be very
Hmm.
proud of
Mhm.
what they do and that kind of
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but I would say back to your question, cooking for sure.
Okay.
Fair.
That's, yeah, I like it. Okay. Chocolate. Touched on it a little bit. White, dark milk, or some other kind of chocolate.
Dark, dark.
Yeah.
Milk is not chocolate. Not sorry, white chocolate is not chocolate.
There you
It's
go.
it's wax with sugar in it. I have tried that ruby chocolate.
Mm,
It's not chocolate.
Mhm.
no,
So
it's kind of
there's a
bitter.
there's a few so when I go to the superstore
Mhm.
in Windsor, they have these little packs, these little snack pack things that are like 10 Nielsen, things like
Mhm.
Smarties,
Mhm.
Kit
Okay.
Kats, Aero bars, Coffee
Coffee
Crunch,
crisp.
Yeah.
Coffee Crisp, sorry. And that milk chocolate is fine because I think your milk chocolate has more chocolate in it than American chocolate
Yeah.
does. I think your solids are higher.
Okay.
I don't willingly buy milk chocolate, but if it ends up in my shopping cart, I mean, I will consume it. But I found
How would it end up
dark
in there?
dark chocolate Smarties when I was at the
Oh.
grocery store, and they're great. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Ooh.
dark chocolate
Yeah,
Dark
so keep an
chocolate
eye out for
Smarties.
those. You don't always see them, but when you do
No.
see
Yeah.
them, grab them.
I
That's
guess
right. Because
people in Michigan know what Canadian Smarties are
Oh,
because you're
yeah,
so
so
close.
they're M&Ms-ish, but I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
they've got a little orange extract or something like that. They're not because M&Ms to me taste like sugar. And
M&M's, yeah, their candy coating is very, very high, but they
yeah,
have a darker chocolate in the
they do.
inside. Yeah.
Yeah, and that special dark that Hershey sells
Mm.
here is pretty
Mm.
good. The best chocolate is C's, which comes from California.
yep.
And when I lived in Phoenix, there was a C's outlet store. Oh my gosh. I would paydays. I was like left the university and headed right for the C's outlet store, and I'd get all dark chocolate. You can
Mm,
make up boxes of your own.
Yes.
But I have to say, when I'm in Canada, I do bring so they're dark chocolate Kit Kats,
Hmm.
yes.
so you can get those. And
Yep.
they sell, so we have a lot of Asian stores, as I was saying earlier, and they sell all the Japanese Kit
Mm,
Kats. And so we
Hmm.
get a big
Green
variety
tea
of Kit
ones.
all the
Kats.
different flavors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Very cool. All right.
Well,
Brings us to our last one, which we already
we
know what
already
you're
know.
going to say here, which I am very happy about. But our last one is about butter tarts and whether
Oh,
you like them with or without raisins.
without, come on. Who puts raisins in butter tarts?
Lisa,
I'm sorry, I
apparently.
don't mean to
Lisa
be.
does.
Do you really? Why? I mean,
That is
to get more
I don't
fruit?
actually like
what a
butter
great
tart,
question.
so it's
Well, okay,
kind of a
that's fine.
double-edged
Yeah.
sword. But when I think about, so this was a thing that happened earlier in one of our podcasts, and actually
Yeah.
you should go back and watch it because it was a
Okay.
Right.
moment. We have
Yeah.
to double check which episode that was,
Was
but
that the second one when we were asking
when
each
we were,
other
yeah, it was
questions?
just the
I
one
think
where we
that's
were
what it was.
introducing
Yeah.
ourselves and we were just talking back and forth. And
Yeah.
she was asking me, she asked me the butter tart question, and I suddenly was like, oh my gosh, I I think I like raisins in my butter tarts. And the
Uh,
look on her face,
I was speechless.
we were just both like, and
yeah.
she was like, I don't think I could do this podcast with you anymore.
Oh, please. Come on.
Maybe a
But
little drama, you know?
yeah,
So
I mean,
this Riverside Pie Cafe that I
yeah.
mentioned in Windsor, and also Parks Blueberries, they have butter tarts as well. So when I was a kid, they used to have them at Kresge's, and then they must, or either that or I dreamed it. But the Riverside Pie Cafe does pecan and walnut and plain, and I guess they do raisin. I've paid no attention to that. And then Parks Blueberries in Thames, Ontario, wherever they are, they have several kinds of butter tarts too. And you can go in, because usually by the time I get there, I'm on my way home. Usually I save that for the trip home from Toronto, and it's probably like 4 o'clock, and I'm ready for a cup of tea and
Yeah,
something
yeah.
sweet. So I'll get a butter tart and a cup of tea, and then I go do a little food shopping, and then I leave. Um, and they have racks and racks of bread and muffins, and you can get butter tarts, and then they have the frozen pies that I mentioned earlier. And so that's like what I'll do is I'll buy an assortment, and then I bag them up and put them in the freezer, and then I
Mhm.
have like a muffin when I need a muffin, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So
Brilliant.
yeah,
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 just ration them out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
Well,
amazing.
I think butter tarts are way too sweet. I would rather have
do you
frosting
really?
than a butter tart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I
what do
don't
you
mind
what
it
do you
too.
actually do, you like ice cream at all?
I love ice cream, yeah.
Okay.
But
Mhm.
I have particular tastes about ice cream too. I don't know.
What tell me about that.
Um,
Like. Do you
I
like things in your ice cream or do you like plain
Not so
flavors?
much. Don't put any nuts in any baking for me usually. I don't really
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
not a big texture girl, although I'm learning to put more textures in because I realize that other people, especially judges on baking shows,
Oh,
like different
yeah.
textures in their baking.
Yeah.
But
But
I'm not a nuts
yeah.
person at all. But I
Yeah.
like caramel everything, salted caramel
Really?
particularly.
Okay. Yeah.
If it has salted caramel ribbon and salted caramel cups, chocolate cups
Okay.
in my ice cream, then
Wow.
I'm very, very happy. And I save all
Ooh.
the cups for the end, and then that's my last little bit. So
I see. I get it. We
yeah,
have
yeah.
a flavor called Moose Tracks,
Yes,
and
yeah.
it has
Peanut butter version.
chocolate, little chocolate cups in it.
Yes, yeah.
And so if I need some, I'll do like lemon sorbet or something, but if I need like the protein, those little, like if it's the end of an afternoon, I still have a deadline, I
Yes.
will get something with the mix-ins. I don't like nuts in ice cream either.
Yeah, no, I
And
don't.
they get hard, and you
Yeah.
really don't. Like
Yeah.
my godmother, Maxine, that I took care of, she loved butter pecan and she would
Mhm.
only eat butter pecan.
Hmm.
Then
And
you get
I couldn't do it. It's
it just
got the little,
interferes.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But texture in ice cream, I think, is really lovely. But I agree with you. Maybe not so much nuts, but I do like cookie crumbs or
Mm.
fudge or caramel,
I don't want to chew
No.
my ice cream.
coffee bits,
No.
Trying
chunky
to think
bits.
if
Coffee
I
bit,
had
like
Yeah.
pieces of coffee bean?
Not
like those
coffee.
espresso covered coffee
Yeah.
beans or the
No,
chocolate
coffee
covered
bean.
espresso
Oh.
beans.
No, no, not
Hmm.
that. But
Okay,
other
so I
like
went, the only time I've had ice cream in Canada was gelato.
Oh,
And there's a store
you're
in
missing out.
Toronto. I stayed in the Danforth the last time I was there, and there's a store called Serrano. And people who are in Toronto will know this store. It's a huge Greek supermarket. And they have pastry. They have all kinds of international food. And then they have beautiful pastry. And then they have gelato. And I went in, it was like July and or August, and I went in there and I was exhausted. And I wanted just the little cup of gelato, and I wanted to take it home and crash and eat my gelato. And I'm like, okay, may I, have one scoop of pistachio? She said, oh, that's not enough. You have to have more. You have to choose another flavor.
What?
And she gave me this mound. I said chose chocolate, and she gave me this mound of gelato, and it took me like 3 days to finish it.
oh wow.
But she's
Wow.
Greek, and she was being
Yeah.
super, super
Yeah. Yeah.
hospitable, and she
Yeah.
could see I was tired.
She's
But I
give me
really
more
didn't
gelato.
need,
Scoop of gelato.
I didn't, of course, I shouldn't say that because I do want to go back there next time in Toronto, and
Oh yeah.
I would take the
Take
gelato.
more.
So,
Yes,
yeah,
that sounds
Nice.
good.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. Do you have a baking scrap for our listeners?
Oh, I do,
Woo!
absolutely.
Oh,
So,
I'm excited.
my tip is that you should have a thermometer for your oven, known
Mm.
Hmm.
as an oven thermometer. So my brother was tired of hearing me complain that I had a slow oven. I have a gas oven where I live right now. And I was telling him that everything took 10 more minutes than the recipes were requiring. And he said, okay, I'm giving you for Christmas an oven thermometer. And I put the oven thermometer in to check the temperature of the oven.
Mhm.
It reflected what it said on the temperature gauge. So 350 Fahrenheit, 180 centigrade.
Yeah.
And it was giving me 350. But for whatever reason, stuff that I put in at 350 wasn't baking in time. So
Mm.
I think it's really important to have an oven thermometer and regularly check your oven. And
Yes.
what we found is that there's those convection ovens that
Hmm.
cycle with the fan.
Mhm.
They hit the temperature that you've set it at, but the fan goes off and the temperature drops.
Oh.
So they're supposed to speed up baking because
Hmm.
they move the air around, but sometimes the convection part is not that reliable.
Oh,
So you can end up thinking you're at, 375 or whatever, and you are when it hits 375, but then it'll drop before the fan comes back on. It's
oh.
really, really important to know what is inside of your oven. And the alternatively, I do it's called toast test. And I take a baking sheet and I take slices of white bread and I just go to some place like Aldi's and buy the Italian white bread and lay it out on the baking sheet. And that will tell you in your oven where the hot spots and the cold spots are, and then you make breadcrumbs.
Smart.
Um, but yeah, it's really important to understand where the hot spots and cold spots are in your oven, and then also the overall temperature. So
Great tip.
they're not expensive. Just get the little kind that hangs from the baking rack, and you'll probably learn quite a bit about why things don't come out the way you hope them to.
Yeah, I probably should get one.
Yeah,
Definitely.
get one for
Yeah.
Christmas.
Both
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
are
What is
fabulous tips. I love the
There
toast
you go.
idea.
Yeah, the toast test is really,
Yes.
really, I prefer to almost prefer to do that than use the oven thermometer. But I think it's important to have one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
agree. I
I'll
think
ask
both of
her.
those
Nope.
are
Oh,
fantastic. But
sweetheart.
and that's really cool because then it actually gives you a lot of knowledge about,
Yeah,
circulating your bakes around as well, right? So when
yeah,
they're
Yeah.
actually baking, if you do have some hot spots in your oven, just the
yeah,
importance of kind of keeping your baking pans moving
Yeah.
during bake time,
Yeah.
if you can.
yes,
Of course, you
yeah.
can't really do
Oh,
that with choux pastry. But
That's
no, that's
true.
true. Or
Gotta
a
be careful with
souffle.
that.
yeah, or
Yes.
a souffle or anything that requires that constant
Hmm.
oven heat. But yeah,
Yeah,
My
yeah,
husband is always on the lookout for what to get me for birthday and Christmas.
yeah.
So I will put that on the list. This is
That's a great
actually,
idea.
that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So,
Well,
I have an either or for both of you.
oh,
Um,
oh,
we get a this or
yeah,
that
oh wow, we
question?
did
yeah,
a this
this
or
or
that.
that. Yeah.
Yay.
So
Okay.
Bruno or Kyla?
Oh man,
Oh, that's dangerous. That
that is
is.
dangerous.
Mm, I don't know. I'm kind of partial to Bruno. I like
Yeah.
them both very, very much. It's very difficult to choose one over the other. But I don't know, when he smiles, he looks like a cute little boy,
No.
and I just go, oh, I just really want to I want to get to know him. Yeah. What do
Yeah.
you think, Christina?
You know what? I think that's a difficult question to ask. It's
See,
hard
I
to
actually answered that
answer.
I shouldn't have answered.
Answer. No, but because that's like choosing your favorite
Favorite
child,
child.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they are both so wonderful and
Yeah.
warm and they're so kind. They're so Canadian, I find, right?
And they're not, well, he's not even
Right.
Canadian, but right, he's
Well,
from
Well,
France.
fair,
Yeah.
fair,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
correct.
an
Yes,
But this is
adopted
not
but
Canadian.
fair.
Yeah.
This is
adopted.
like the raisin thing all over again, because I always said no raisins because I thought you wanted me to say no raisins, and now I'm
Oh
like, well,
no.
she'll pick Kyla, so I'll pick Bruno, so it's fair.
No, and so just based on that, I will say Kyla, and
He'll
because
say
I
Kyla.
actually had an
Okay.
opportunity to meet her.
Oh, great. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
in London, so I
Yeah.
knew where
Oh,
she worked.
fantastic.
It
Yeah.
almost sounds like I stalked her, but I didn't really stalk her.
Oh, I'm sure she was pleased. My
You know
goodness.
what? She was the sweetest person ever. So gracious. We had a fabulous conversation about everything baking, how she became a judge on Great Canadian Baking Show, her family history with the
Yeah.
bakery that they had, what she does now. I mean, she's
Yeah.
just was so incredibly kind and so lovely. All the time in the world for her. And of course, Bruno actually lives locally. I live,
Yeah.
Yeah.
in on the West Coast. He's out
Okay.
here as well. Never run into him ever.
Oh, well, you should. I mean,
Yeah.
just
But
put
I mean,
yourself physically in front of
I know.
him.
But I meet Kyla in
Yeah.
London,
Yeah,
that
sure.
that makes
Yeah.
total sense. But they're both so
Uh,
wonderful.
Yeah.
And we're so lucky
yeah.
to have them as the judges of the Great Canadian Baking Show. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I was being
I
very
agree.
true to the format of this or that, and I was picking one person,
Mhm.
but of course it's impossible to pick between them. They're such a
Yeah.
I
Look,
don't want Kyla to be mad at me.
we got both of them in there. It's all good. And we can
So
blame
Blame the American.
we can blame the American.
Sneaky.
I love it. No, that's
Funny.
awesome.
Yeah.
No, but what a wonderful show, and
Thank you. Yeah.
it's
A real
been such a
pleasure.
pleasure
sorry,
chatting
my
with you
dog
today,
fell.
Micheline.
Oh, do you need to grab your dog?
Well, he
Or
just all of a sudden I felt this pressure at the back of my chair, and I was like, "What's happening?" And I turned around, and he's like falling half
bug?
between the bed.
Oh, you funny.
Love it. I
Sorry,
love
I
it.
have too
Oh,
many dogs.
Yeah. Oh, it's all right.
Okay, let's say that again so I can edit it.
So what I said was, it's so wonderful having you on our podcast and having
Yeah.
you join us. And what a fascinating conversation we had over the last little bit. Really incredible your journey, the people that you've made those connections with, how incredible uh, those connections, like how they led you to the path
Yes.
that you're in right now and following your passion as being a food writer and still being able to do the other things that you love. It's really,
Yeah.
it sounds like you've got such an incredible balance to your life, with your cars, with your business writing, with your love of your baseball and sports, and then of course with your passion for cooking and baking. So it's been such a joy having you on Baking Scraps. Thank you again for
Oh,
joining us.
it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you.
It was lovely to meet you, and we look forward
Great
to
to meet
talking
you as
again.
well. Yeah, I
Yes.
hope so. Maybe at the end
Yes.
of the season,
Yeah,
we
that's a good
do
idea,
a
actually.
recap. Maybe you can
Yeah,
have a couple guests on and we can kick over, talk over
kick it
what
over.
happened. Yeah.
That sounds fabulous.
And
Yeah.
looking forward to reading your weekly column as well on
Yeah.
Culinary Women.
Culinary Woman. Yeah,
Yes.
everybody's welcome to sign up for it. It's just culinarywoman.substack.com. It's free to sign up. They get a weekly newsletter on Sundays, and then I have paid subscriptions, and people get additional content and they're eligible for our giveaways. So
Oh, perfect.
anyone is invited to sign up for it. Yeah,
All the best to your Detroit
thank you.
Tigers in the
Mhm.
postseason. And yes,
I think it'll be over with by the time you guys edit this, but
you never know.
we'll
You never know.
see.
It's a
Yeah,
whole new ball
knock
game
on wood. Yeah,
Whole
we'll
new
in the
ball
see.
game.
postseason. It's a whole
Yeah,
new ball game when it comes to the postseason. So
there
you
you
never
go.
know.
Yeah,
Cool.
sure.
Right.
All
Thank
Okay.
you
right.
so much. Talk
Thank you
Thank
so
soon.
you.
much.
All right.
Okay.
Take
Bye,
care.
Micheline.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was a very different type of conversation for us.
It was. And
Yeah.
hopefully everybody, I was fascinated by her journey. I
Yes.
mean, how cool was that?
Yeah.
Right?
Lots of different roads that all seem to join up to get to exactly where she needed to be and where she wanted to be. She seems very happy and content where she is. And she did a great job. I really enjoyed reading her article because she had a good perspective. And I was kind of thinking it's like us doing this podcast for people who enjoy watching the show. You like to get that content about all these different, not just the show, but watching these baking shows, you like to get the content elsewhere. And if it's done well, then it's even more enjoyable. And so I was really enjoying reading what she had to say. And part of it was that she wrote very well. And for
Mhm.
me, that's very important. I'm the one who will correct all the spelling errors.
Exactly. Well, and that's your one of your passions as well is writing too, right? And you're so good at it. But yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation with her. Of course, I'm a big sports fan, as you know, so I think having some of those that connection
Yeah.
and of course it's about, continuing to build this really cool baking community that we're part of
Yeah.
and any conversation that we're able to have with other people who share our passion for baking or culinary industry and as
Yeah.
a whole.
Huge. Huge.
It's all good people. And so it was what a fun conversation. I
And
could
I
have
didn't
talked to
have
her
to
for,
ask her how to pronounce culinary because she said it very many times. So I was like, okay, I stand corrected. It's
I still like the
spelled
way you say it. So
culinary.
culinary, it sounds so posh and, sophisticated.
I would like some feedback on if anybody else has ever pronounced it that way. Culinary. Would you like
Culinary,
to
culinary,
call in the culinary team?
culinary. Well,
Maybe,
there you go.
perhaps. I don't know. We should ask Prue Leaf how to say it.
Well, maybe we could have Prue on the show one day.
Wouldn't that be good? Prue and
Wouldn't-
Paul?
Could you imagine? Well, maybe if we actually let's take a page out of Michelin's
Okay.
playbook.
Yep.
We will just put it out in the universe.
It's going to happen.
It's gonna happen.
All
We're
right.
gonna
I'm
have,
looking forward to it.
yep, too funny. Anyhow,
All right.
always
It
a pleasure, my dear.
was lovely. Thank you for a great day.
Thank you for a fabulous day.
It was so nice. We'll
Well,
chat again soon.
I'm sure we will.
Thanks. And
We're,
bye, everybody out there.
bye,
Thanks for
everyone.
joining us.
Happy baking. Take care.
Happy baking.